Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to my show, High Road to Humanity. In every episode, I tell you powerful true stories filled with great wisdom that you can use in your own life as you strive for a higher road to travel. My featured guests will have their own unique stories to tell that enlighten your mind and your soul. So kick back, relax, and learn the secret to success when you take the high road.
First touch, strong connection, it lays deep in your soul.
Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And we have a fabulous guest here today with me. Her name is Kartar Diamond, and she has written a book about her son's schizophrenia, and it's called Noah's Schizophrenia, A Mother's Search for Truth. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I kind of want to preface the show with that. Now, like I usually do, let's talk about what's happening with humanity. I pulled a couple things up here today I want to address. And the first is Larry King, because I love Larry King, and he died at the age of 87 this week. And I just wanted to say, I used to watch his shows and, all the cool interviews, and you can even go back and watch his interviews, and they're just timeless and they're just so fun. And he was just a great soul. So I wanted to mention that he passed, and he got the COVID, unfortunately. And I kind of had heard that he had it. And when he did, I was worried because he's older and he had health issues, but God bless. And, prayers to the family. I just wanted to say that real quick today. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which was really interesting to me, I was looking online, you know how I find these things, and listen to this, you guys. So not that I have one, but My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell permanently suspended from Twitter. This was shocking to me. So Twitter has suspended Mike Lindell, the CEO of My Pillow, from the social media platform. He had been using his Twitter account to spread disinformation about the 2020 election, including false claims of voter fraud and election ringing. Lindell's account was permanently suspended due to repeated violations of our civil integrity policy, a Twitter spokesman told NPR. So it was not immediately clear which post from Lindell led to his removal from the social media platform, but Lindell is closely ally of former President Trump, and he visited the White House during the final week of Trump's administration. Here's the thing about this, this is the scary thing about free speech. We're all supposed to be able to speak, but now we've got these big companies that are deciding who gets to speak and who doesn't. Neither right or not wrong. It's scary to find out that people are being banned. What do you think about that, Kartar?
Well, I have pretty strong opinions about that. I'm appalled at what's happening with our free speech, and I can remember actually about a year ago having a conversation with an old friend who really wanted to silence, a number of different personalities, and I said, you know what? It doesn't matter what somebody's saying. In fact, if they're saying something really offensive, you kind of want them to out themselves and know who your enemies are, so to speak. Don't you know?
Yeah,
And it was specifically with this whole Nazi narrative. And I said, and
right,
I grew up genetically 100% Jewish, even
right.
though I'm not a practicing Jew. And I said, no, we got to let free speech reign, because otherwise the day will come when your free speech will be denied you too.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's going to happen to all of us, and people need to stand up and say something. And whether you agree with Trump and this whole situation, I mean, just because you're associated with him, they're going to knock you off of Twitter. I mean, I don't know. It's some really scary times that we're in right now. It really is. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with knocking people off of Twitter. And then they've got this new one, and you can join. So it's an alternative, but then I heard people were trying to get that knocked off so that people didn't have free speech, and that's scary.
Right.
You know
Right.
that? That's really scary. That's some scary stuff. Well, anyway, we need to get back to it. Having said that, you guys, I want to tell you a little bit about this book that Kartar wrote before I bring her on. And I'm just going to read a little synopsis here so you guys get a feel for what we're going to talk about today. So one unremarkable night, Kartar Diamond's remarkable talented 15-year-old son walked into the living room and shouted, "Every musician in LA is stealing my ideas," and went back into his room. Minutes later, he came back, belt in hand and began whipping the couch and shouting with escalating paranoia. Little did his mother realize their journey into hell had begun. As her son crumbles before her eyes, Diamond powers through the endless confusion and ineffectiveness of the modern mental health care system and demands not only a diagnosis, but a way to treat her son and help him live the fullest expression of his life possible. So, having said that, let me give you a little information about Carter. Just so, and Carter, when I read your bio, I was like really thrilled. Carter Diamond has a long established career as a classically trained feng shui consultant. And I'm like so big into feng shui. Arthur in it, she's an author and an educator. She's worked with thousands of clients and students in the area of Chinese metaphysics, as well as having a background in yoga practices and meditation. She's based in Southern California, and she volunteers as a family member presenter for law enforcement crisis intervention training programs designed to give police and sheriffs tools they need to better serve the mentally ill. Now, she's also been a member of the local NAMI group and intends to use this book as a national advocacy tool to better the lives of those living with schizophrenia. Welcome to High Road to Humanity today, Carter.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on today. So, what a trip you've been through. I mean, your son was what, 15 years old? Tell us your story. When did he start showing signs of schizophrenia?
Well, the more obvious signs began at age 15. Actually, I was blindsided. There weren't hardly any clues before that point. He presented as a really physically and mentally healthy child, very social and hilarious, funny. He just fell apart the summer of his 15th year, and it took us a while, to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
In fact, unlike some parents, we actually got him to a therapist right away, and yet that still was not guaranteeing us that he would get the help he needed. So the
Mhm.
memoir kind of outlines all the mistakes that that we made for over a decade.
Right. Now, were you divorced or at the time that so did you have support system or were you pretty much on your own or was his father around to help support you in this or?
Well, I got divorced from my son's father when he was only about 5.
Oh, okay.
And we had joint custody, 1 week on, 1 week off. We lived close together, 10 minutes apart. And that part of our
Work.
divorce actually worked. It
Yeah.
was okay.
Yeah. Did he see any signs or say anything about your husband as far as, your ex-husband as far as.
Well, when everything exploded at age 15, I got informed he was at his father's house at the time, and the
Mhm.
stepmother called and said, he's saying some really bizarre things.
Okay.
I asked what was he saying, and they were so uncharacteristic of him. They were paranoid statements, like he said that an adult neighbor next door, was stealing all of his ideas.
Yeah.
So he had delusions about a number of people, including his father, which was really sad because, when you get divorced and you might have, some hard feelings about
Right.
your spouse, when it's over the top and it's actually not true at all, then it's very stressful. So
Right.
I felt bad about that for sure.
Right. Now, did they immediately say he was schizophrenic or did they not know what was wrong?
Well, ironically, the first psychiatrist that I took him to said he has schizophrenia.
Okay.
And then a month later, he said, no, it's social anxiety. And
So they weren't
then
sure. Okay.
he went undiagnosed for another 6 months or so until more hospitalizations. Then it varied from bipolar disorder with psychotic features to schizoaffective disorder, which
Mm,
means schizophrenia with a mood disorder as well. So
right.
it changed for a while.
Well, and the thing is, and I just wanted to ask you, it started, when did it got kind of out of control and you needed to put him somewhere. He couldn't stay home. You had to go to work. I mean, what was the dynamic there? I mean, this isn't real life, people want to hear about what happened. Did it get to a point where he couldn't stay home and because you had to go to work or what was the situation?
Well, in retrospect, he should have stayed at home, but we were following the advice of some social workers who were
Oh,
affiliated with the therapist, and they insisted that the route to go would be to send him to one of these out of state schools where he would be taken care of. And at the time, I lived in Los Angeles, and there
right.
was this notion that we have to get him out of big bad Los Angeles with all the entitled teenagers, in West LA taking drugs casually, blah,
Gotcha.
blah, blah.
Gotcha.
And so it made sense at the time as well. We looked into, I think it was UCLA's outpatient adolescent program. They were booked for 6 months.
Yeah.
So at the time, we thought, okay, now it makes sense. And we thought it would be temporary, maybe 6 months or so,
Right.
but
You just never know.
it's
Hey,
almost two
listen, we're going to go to
years.
commercial break real quick, but when we come back, I want to talk more about what you did in your situation to help, so we can help other people. You guys, her book is called Noah's Schizophrenia. If you're watching me on YouTube, I'm holding it up. It's very good. If you have a child who has issues, this is a mother's search for truth. It's her story, and she tells you what happened. This is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity, and we will be right back. Hey, it's Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity. I'm here today with Carter Diamond. Carter, thanks for coming on today. I know this is a difficult subject to talk about, or maybe it's, I don't know. Is it tough for you to discuss this?
It actually isn't, and I can't
Okay.
explain why. Maybe because
No, tell
I'm
me.
so used to it now.
Yeah.
But even in
Yeah.
the beginning, it wasn't hard to talk about.
Right.
Um, but we should say that in different cultures and societies, it's extremely taboo. And there are people who would rather, you know, move out of town than talk to somebody about their son or daughter's mental health problems.
Well, and I want you to educate me and the audience because from what I understand, and I'm glad you wrote this book because I don't think there's a ton of books out there to help people. And is that why you put it together, I guess?
Well, I wrote it for a number of reasons. I have this other professional life and I'm a writer. And so it was easy for me to write it
Okay.
as a therapy for myself. But I also wrote it always with the mindset that I wanted to get the book into the hands of local, state, and even federal legislators, policymakers, whistleblowing on what's going on routinely, the failures of the mental health care system. Our story is not unique in that way. It's
Okay.
actually kind of a composite of a lot of other people's stories. And so I wanted to help family members realize they're not alone. I've had people call me and email me say, oh my God, your story sounds just like ours.
Yeah.
And also give tips and advice and information so that people can avoid some of the mistakes we made.
Well, yeah, you got him into some of these different homes, and then he didn't have proper supervision, and then you would have to go find him. Can you talk about that a little? Explain to the audience what happened.
Yeah, and not every community has these, but in LA County, actually throughout California, they have what's called licensed board and cares. They're
Okay.
licensed by the state of California. Other communities might have them and they might call them different things, but they're really just one step above homelessness. And it's a place for people to live where the staff will administer their medication if they're on any. They get
Okay.
3 meals a day, they have a roommate, but they're not therapeutic environments and a lot can go wrong in them. And so my son, he got evicted a dozen times. He
Why
caused,
did he get evicted? What happened?
well, there was property damage because he wasn't stable. The
Okay.
psychiatrist assigned to him wasn't really helping.
Right.
The environment itself was very undermining. He would smoke in areas that he's not allowed to smoke.
I
He
see.
would panhandle in neighborhoods. And eventually, the board and care had their limit as well. They have their own rules about what you can and cannot do.
Hmm.
And so he was getting evicted, and it became harder and harder to even find a place that would accept him.
And I just want to say, I started to say before, but I wanted to mention this, growing up, and this is my naivety, so I'm glad you're here today. We always were, afraid of the mental institution. It had such a stigma, as a kid growing up. Oh, stay away from there. That's the mental, that's the nut house, people called it. And
Mhm.
then, as I've gotten older, I've realized that a lot of these um, mental institutions is what they used to call them. I don't know if they still do call them that, but they've closed. And so what's happened, what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've seen most of these people have got lost in the system, or they're homeless, or the family just, has had to take care of them. Is that pretty much what the deal is?
Right. Many decades ago, when they started closing down the state hospitals in favor of federally funded open clinics, they realized after the fact that people with the most serious mental illness are not going to voluntarily seek out treatment.
Right.
And so things got worse and worse. And now we have this huge homeless population, many of whom are mentally ill. And if they're not out on the streets, they might be in jail for having committed maybe even very petty crimes, quote unquote crimes, like relieving yourself, behind the
Mm-hmm.
bushes.
Right.
And so that population that's homeless and incarcerated, that's mentally ill, is pretty much the same as what used to be the number population who were in long-term psychiatric facilities and hospitals.
Well,
Um, yeah.
I mean, here's the situation that I see. I mean, are they doing, it doesn't seem like anybody's doing anything about it. It seems like it's getting worse. And a lot of these people, have committed heinous crimes. Not that your son was in that, but there are a lot of people when they're not on their medication, they're not in their right frame of mind. And you can't, what are you going to do if somebody's in that situation? Is anything being done? I don't see anything being done about this.
Right. It's really messy because there are, for instance, there are two big opposing camps. There are people, whether they're familiar with mental illness or not, who basically have an opinion that psychotropic medications cause people to become violent
Oh,
and go off the
seriously?
rails. Oh, yeah. There's a whole anti-psychiatry,
Okay.
anti-medication group of people. And then there are those who say, oh, the reason they're violent is because they went off their medication, and getting to the right medication or the right combination of medications is a whole problem unto itself. In fact, some of the problems with medication are because of the way insurance companies handle the
Well,
situation. So,
yeah, that's
so
half of it too, because, and I was gonna, and we haven't even talked about that. I mean,
yeah.
how has this been for you financially?
Um, well, it's had an impact.
I
And for a
bet.
lot of people, it bankrupts them. Families
Yeah.
trying to find proper care that isn't covered by insurance. There's the whole problem with the HIPAA privacy laws, where parents are often shut out of the process and not able to converse with the doctors and the therapists because of the privacy laws. And there have been some tragic outcomes because of that, where the parents couldn't deliver the proper, accurate information about what was really going on with their loved one. So there's just so many
Because
different
of the HIPAA,
problems.
because of this law.
Yeah.
People come up with this stuff, but they don't think these things through. And this is real life. So, wow, this is just
And
crazy to hear this.
And the way the laws are now is that people have the right, they call it a civil right, to be as psychotic as they want to be, as long as they don't hurt themselves or other people. And so they wait until the 11th hour for many people before they force treatment on them, because they haven't been really working on the preventative part or the intermediate type of care that somebody, even with serious mental illness, might accept if it was presented to them in the right way. So we don't have those horrible asylums, those insane asylums that we had a century or two ago,
Yeah,
where
but
people,
but the people are just scattered.
yeah, it's your perspective. Do you think somebody's suffering when they're laying on the
I
street?
mean,
And
yeah. I mean, what
yeah,
happens to compassion? I do this show for a reason, High Road to Humanity. Where are we as a society, where we have let all this go to the wayside? Because I know it's been going on for a long time. I'll tell you a quick story. I volunteered at a hospital, gosh, years back, probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I thought I'd be a real nice person and go to and they put me in the emergency ward. And I was shocked. And it's, I was shocked by the amount of homeless people that come in just to sleep in the
Right.
emergency and the people, and then they wanted me to go up and take food to the psych ward, and I was actually afraid to do it, to go by myself, because I'm not that big. I mean, if somebody could overpower me. So what I saw was just people going to the emergency room, and I saw that firsthand here in Albuquerque, actually, and because they didn't have any place else to go. Have you seen that?
Right. I mean, it's not happening on a large scale, but I think the word is called malingering. And there are some homeless people and mentally ill people who are actually okay with being hospitalized, because for them it's like a low budget motel where they can go and get some food, be out of the rain or what
And they're
have you.
okay. And they're okay.
And they may actually be taking up a bed for somebody who's psychotic and violent, and so really we have to prioritize, obviously, because there's a fraction of the number of beds available that there used to be.
Right.
So that is one instance. And some people argue we in our effort to destigmatize mental illness, a lot of different advocates will say that mentally ill people are usually the victim of violence more so than the perpetrators.
Correct.
But an untreated mentally ill person is actually 3 times more violent than someone in the general population. And there's a reason why in the psychiatric wards that they're locked and the nurses have like emergency whistles.
Right.
There's a reason why
Well,
social
yeah,
workers.
yeah, because you don't know, and I was going to ask you when he went, and I wrote this down on my notes. He had some short-term hospital stays. Um, did any of those hospital stays help him in the beginning when you would take him?
Not really. In fact, they made him, when he was a teenager, they made him more irate and more, incensed that this is what was happening to him.
Okay.
You do what you can and you do what's available to you, but he didn't get better from the hospitalizations. In fact, when I was trying to build a case for him to become conserved, one of the documents that I created myself was a bullet point history of his evictions
I
in
see.
between the hospitalizations, because I wanted to show that he never really was stable in
Right.
between all the
All of that.
hospitalizations.
Okay, we got to go to commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about where he is today. Where's Noah today? What's going on? And so we can talk about helping other people. You guys, it's called Noah's Schizophrenia, is the book, A Mother's Search for Truth. I'm here today with Kartar Diamond. I'm holding up the book. If you're watching me on YouTube today, it's Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity. I'm here today with Kartar Diamond. Kartar, thanks for coming on. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you. I just want to say on behalf of the East Indian community who may be wondering, my name is actually pronounced Kartar.
Kartar, I'm sorry. See, and I
It's okay.
didn't know that. And I always ask in the beginning. Oh my gosh. So now
It's
I'm
okay.
embarrassed. So it's
Some people say
Kartar.
Cartier diamond.
I love it. Okay, we can say Cartier. Qatar. I like that better anyway. I wanted to ask, where is Noah now? How old is he now? You wrote this book. What, about a year ago, right? It came out.
Yeah, I actually finished it during the March lockdown.
That's what I thought. Okay,
COVID
yeah.
2020, and
Yeah.
got it published later in the year.
Okay.
My son will be 30 come
Oh,
May
wow.
in
Oh, wow.
2021. Yeah, so now it's half his life that he's had
Yeah.
his mental illness as a big part of his whole life experience.
Well, what happened? Tell the audience the story. How did he finally get help? Because he does finally get help. What worked for you?
Well, it did get extremely bad. The summer of 2016, he did wind up homeless, and the homeless capital of the world, Skid Row in downtown LA.
Yeah.
I still have PTSD whenever a client wants me to come down to that area. I'm like, oh, makes me a little nervous.
Well, tell the story. What happened?
Well, he was down there on and off for the summer, and I would go down to give him cash. I would go down there to give him debit cards. I would go to visit him to let him know what was going on in the background of me trying to find emergency housing for him, as well as some social workers. He pretty much hung out in front of Union Mission, a homeless shelter. So I kind of knew where he was. That was one phase where at least I knew where he was. But it's a third world country down there. It's very dangerous. One time I approached him and he was laying just splayed out on the sidewalk, and I didn't know if he was alive or
Oh
dead,
my
so it
gosh.
was very high drama.
Now, how
And
old
as
was he then when he was down on Skid Row?
well, he's 25.
Okay.
And I explained also in the memoir all of my emotions and just the absurdity of it, because in some other situation, of course, I would have scooped him up and brought him home and thrown him in the shower and fed him and
Yeah, why
would have,
didn't you? Why didn't you do
well,
that?
because of the lack of services, if he had been at home with me and acting psychotic, if I had called social workers or the police, they would have said, well, he has a roof over his head and food, so sorry, we can't help you. So
Okay.
sometimes we have to push the envelope and make the situation as dire as possible, taking all kinds of risks before a lot of help can really come. So it was not exactly strategic, but I was also waiting to see if my son would gain any insight into, the consequences of his actions,
I see.
what have
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
So it got real bad, and then finally, with the last hospitalization, he was able to get conserved. And what that means that another adult like me could be
Okay.
his legal guardian.
Okay.
That's when things got better.
When you were able to have a say so.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And so you almost had to let him hit rock bottom.
Yes, but seriously mentally ill people don't really hit rock bottom, because if we hadn't had various lucky things come into play, he could have easily died. And in fact, when the social workers went down to visit him on Skid Row one of the last times, he said, "I'm fine. I don't need your help. Go away." And because those services are voluntary, they had to legally say, okay, you don't want our help anymore. And he would have merged right into that homeless population. And, about a year later, he was telling me that his back was hurting him. And I said, wow, what happened? And then he said, well, when I was down on San Pedro, somebody kicked me in the back. And,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and people were stealing his debit card. I mean, it's a zoo,
It
it's
was a sick.
horrible.
Did you pray? Are you spiritual?
I think of myself as spiritual, and I meditated, I prayed, I called on my deceased mother to come and help. I mean,
Hey, mom, I can use you right now.
your grandson is having a hard time. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I did try to muster up all of my spiritual strength to get through it. And of course, you mentioned earlier NAMI, NAMI. I went to family support meetings. I got a lot of help and support from people who are in the same boat. We're the only
Okay.
ones that can really understand it, and that helped me negotiate a lot of different problems.
Right. Now how long was he there? And then you became his guardian. And then what did you do after you became his guardian?
Well, he was hospitalized for over 5 months, waiting essentially to get into a higher level of care. They call them IMDs,
Right.
Institute of Mental Disease. California still has some of them. I've spoken in other formats where the people didn't even have IMDs in their
You met
state.
somebody that told you about this.
Well, once you get involved in the mental health care system,
Yeah.
if you have a loved one, you do find out about these. And so,
Yeah.
from a regular hospital, he had to stay there 5 months because there was a waiting list
Right.
to get into a place that he should have gotten into within a couple weeks. Um, some people wait a year to get into the IMD.
How come? What's the wait for?
The sheer volume of people who need help and the lack of these facilities.
Okay.
Like LA County has a lot of different services, but the high number of people who need them means that you'll wait for months.
How many
And sometimes,
facilities are there where you are?
Well, as far as the locked IMDs, I don't know how many there are in California, and I'm new now to Orange County, but in LA County, there were about a dozen, and they might hold about 100 people or
And
so
what's the
each.
IMD stand for again?
Institute of Mental Disease.
Disease.
And
Okay.
supposedly when they go there, that's where all the therapy and, the higher level of care is supposed to take
Is this
place.
new? Is this something? I mean, I've never heard of this before. So when did these come into play? I wonder.
They've been around for decades, but a lot of states have completely eliminated them.
Okay, that's where that's where the disconnect is. Because yeah, so they've eliminated them. Now they're coming back. Is that what you're finding, or what do you
Mm,
see?
No, in fact, these IMDs that I'm referring to are still only temporary. We're not talking about the
Okay.
long-term ones where people stayed, for forever. These are temporary where people might stay for 6 months to 2 years, and
And
then
then what?
hopefully they get stable and better, and then they get discharged to a lower level of care,
Okay.
which might be one of these board and cares. And the cycle repeats because these
Yeah.
programs aren't good and they wind up back in the hospital. I mean, I think it's outrageous that my son was hospitalized about 9 times, but I know people, their son or daughter has been hospitalized 40 times. I mean, dozens of times, and they still don't
Mhm.
get the care that they need.
So hospitalization doesn't seem to be the answer. Medication seems to be the answer. Yes.
Well, it's part of a comprehensive treatment, and there's, a
Okay.
dozen different medications. Some of them
Work, some
people do
don't.
well on, some don't. But the whole mental health care industry is crippled by lack of will, lack of appropriate services, and it doesn't even make sense fiscally or economically. You would think that they would at least create programs that worked in their financial interests
Right.
instead of all this recycling. And then the incarceration aspect gets very expensive to put somebody in jail compared to actually providing them a dignified, way to live. It's
Yeah.
all kind of upside down backwards, no matter how you look at it.
It seems like, and I hate to be so harsh, but it seems like we've thrown our mentally ill away.
Right. They are still the most stigmatized, marginalized population. I mean, right now everybody, cares about this demographic and that demographic and everybody being represented, but people still don't get it when it comes to serious mental illness. In fact, we've had to insert that word serious mental illness because
People
uh,
aren't taking it seriously.
well, no, there are people who, let's say, maybe they're high functioning, they have episodic depression. We could say they're mentally ill, but maybe they're a lawyer. The seriously mentally ill includes a population that doesn't know they're ill. Like
Right.
someone with Alzheimer's, they have lack of insight. It's called anosognosia. And so they're the hardest to treat. Generally, they don't want help, but they
Because
need
they
it.
don't realize they need it.
They need it more than anybody.
Oh, man.
And that's the population that is still getting shoved aside, and funds for mental health care are still going to the people who are asking for it. The squeaky wheel gets the
So
grease.
who are these people that are asking for it? The people at the facilities or individuals
Well,
or
there are people who have marriage and, problems. There's people who have socioeconomic problems, and there are people who have mental illness and post-traumatic stress disorder and suicidal ideation. And there are people who definitely need help, and they need the mental health care industry to support them. But for the schizophrenic who is homeless and says, no, I don't need your help. And by the way, I'm Lady Gaga, when they're
Mhm.
not, I mean, there's people who have delusions about who they
Who
even
they
are.
are. I know. I
And
know.
so those people still get pushed aside. They
Right.
are the hardest to treat, but they are our society. 1% of the population has schizophrenia. About 1 to 2% of the population has bipolar
I
disorder.
didn't know that. That's a high number. Hey, listen, we got to go to commercial break. We'll be right back. We're going to talk a little more about this. I still want to find out what happened to Noah and how he's doing. You guys, I'm here today with Kartar Diamond, and her book is Noah's I'm sorry, Schizophrenia, A Mother's Search for the Truth. I'm laughing, but she's a fun guest, and I'm really glad she came on our show today. Hey, it's Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity. We're talking about Noah's schizophrenia. We're talking about mental illness today on High Road to Humanity. And this is something that I'm really glad that we did this show and um, that we're talking to Kartar Diamond about it. Where is Noah today? What's going on?
Okay, we're coming up on 2 years that he's been living in a private residential program. It's
Okay.
called the John Henry Foundation. It's in
Okay.
Orange County, California.
I love
And
Orange County.
yeah, and it's a rare jewel of a place. There aren't very many places like it. And across the country, there are other, high level residential programs, but many of them are quite expensive.
Right.
So the John Henry Foundation really serves as an excellent recovery model that's also affordable for a lot of people. And, I wish that people in positions to create these residential long-term programs would take their cues from the John Henry
Well, what's it
Foundation.
like? I mean, do they have apartments or how is it set up?
Well, they evaluate each person individually, and some people have a roommate, and some people, like my son, actually have his own room, which is nice. They have these cute bungalow cottages that surround a nice courtyard with shaded patio furnishings. They have a half a dozen cats that they take care of and feed. And, animal therapy is actually
Yeah.
important in the process. And they have a program where people can pick and choose what kind of activities they want to participate in.
Mhm.
They have a psychiatrist from UC Irvine visit them. They have a chef make all
Oh,
kinds of
wow.
interesting, delicious, and healthy food for them.
And they make sure they take their medication, I would imagine.
Yeah, and they have psych interns that come to visit. And prior to COVID, and they're participating in the whole shelter in place
Okay.
guidelines, even though it's not a locked facility. They have been very careful. And prior to that, they had activities 7 days a week where they would take people to Barnes and Noble and
Mm.
Target and museums and beaches and Starbucks and things that people actually want to do.
Yeah. How's he
Uh,
feel? How does he feel about it? Like when you come to visit, what's he say to you?
he's more content than he's ever been, and he's also more conversational. He's
Uh,
more affectionate. He's balanced. He doesn't have the stresses of what he was putting up with at the board and cares. And I didn't know any better. I thought that those were appropriate places for him to be. But it makes a world of difference when you have highly trained people who really care and take a lot of pride in what they do. The staff there is wonderful, and they really encourage parent participation,
mhm.
which is diametrically opposite of the rest of the mental health care industry, which wants parents to just go away. In fact, some of
Well,
the old
yeah, because they don't want you to know what's going on, and that's a red flag right there, isn't it?
absolutely. They have an exercise program. So everything is geared holistically towards the person's being stable and inviting them to do what they can do. There are even some people there who work. Have been people there who go back to college. My son's not at that level yet, but I hope he will be one day. And
Nice.
yeah, they have the security. He's made friends there. It's wonderful.
That's awesome. Now, how do we get more facilities like this? I mean, how did this come into being, first of all, and how do we get more of them?
Well, I don't know the whole history of the John Henry Foundation, but I have heard that they started about 30 years ago when I think a small group of family members in Newport Beach decided we've had enough of the lack of services through the government. We need to strike out on our own.
Mhm.
And I often recommend that people in different communities, if you have no good resources, you might want to partner up with other parents and people that you might meet through
Mhm.
NAMI family support groups to create your own kind of co-op housing. Of course, we're advocating for funds to be delineated to better housing for people with mental illness. That can happen. That can
Yeah, but why
easily
doesn't the
happen.
government, and I know you don't have all the answers, but what has been your experience with why the funding is not there to build these facilities? Why is it now into the people's hands, which is kind of crazy? I mean, we closed them down and now it seems like you have to build it yourself. Is that what this has come to? Why don't they get
Uh,
funding? What's the
It's
reasoning?
it's such a can of worms. It's so politically charged, in terms of how each city, county, state, federal, how they handle this. It's still
Mhm.
so controversial, but in the big picture, there is a lack of housing. There's a lack of healthy, safe, therapeutic housing. And, there's that whole subject of NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Yeah, people don't care.
They don't want to have a halfway house or even a sober living house or a home for people with mental illness to exist. And then there are all kinds of um, undermining things that take place with parents and family members who would be willing to have their loved one live at home if they could get more support.
Yeah, and that was my question in the very beginning. Is that a possibility? And you say it is possible, or no, it's not possible.
Sure, it could be possible. And each situation is unique where you have to decide, is it better for the family and the mentally ill person for them to live at home, or maybe the dynamic is not.
Well, I
And
mean,
they,
and I wonder if you can, you know, how when for the elderly, you can have somebody come in assisted living. Is there such a thing for the mentally ill? I guess is my question.
it's real haphazard. I mean, they have something in LA called in-home support services where you
Mhm.
could literally have somebody come in. I think they're paid through Medi-Cal, but they will come and they will clean and they'll do grocery shopping and they'll do light housework and transportation. But there's a huge waiting list
Same
to
thing.
get those services. Same thing with social workers and therapists. Um, some communities have what's called FSP, full service partnership, where
Okay.
a social worker will come to visit somebody at home. They're all voluntary programs. When I think is one of the cruelest things is the government SSI program, supplemental security income. And if somebody's seriously mentally ill and disabled, can't work, if they live in one of these crappy board and cares, they get the maximum allowable, about $1,000 a month, and the board and care will accept that as full payment. If the person lives at home, they reduce the fees down to like $650, and it doesn't make any sense because you're going to spend a lot more on food and other things when they live at
So
home.
the system's broken, is what you're telling me.
It's a negative incentive for somebody to have their loved one live at home. And if that were,
Versus somewhere else. Well, what can people do? I mean, what's the answer here? What
well,
can people
people,
do?
they can, when you know what's wrong in your own community, you can certainly call your local Department of Mental Health. You can band together and advocate and get petitions for, your local board of supervisors to look at where there's neglect, where there's fraud, where there's lack of services. I mean, it has to be from a grassroots level at this
Right.
point to get people to move and make changes. And everybody can choose one thing that they're really passionate about. If you try to handle everything, it will be overwhelming.
Mhm.
Some people might want to focus on changing those HIPAA privacy laws. Another person might want to work on housing, or the laws that are in existence regarding involuntary treatment.
Mhm.
Or
I really like where he is right now. I really like where Noah is. I'm
Mhm.
intuitive, and I really like what they did in Newport Beach. I think that's the answer. I think it's each community coming together and taking care of their own.
Yeah, family members have a vested interest anyway, so they
Mhm.
do make the best advocates.
Yeah, that would be really cool if, if each community would come together, if we could get the word out there and communities would come together and do their own facility, because that's almost that way, it's run properly. Because I think when it gets in the government's hands, it's a mess. And yeah, it just doesn't seem to work. Anyway, that's my feeling on it. But I'm glad you came today, and I'm glad you enlightened me and the audience on schizophrenia. Thank you so much, Carter. I appreciate it.
And also, it is a genetically based brain disorder. I think a lot of people who don't have interactions with a mentally ill family member might assume that people turn out that way because of abuse.
Right.
And of course that does happen, but I've encountered through NAMI parents and other family members who are some of the most conscious, loving people I've ever met. And so it should be known that the parents are often in the background where they want to help their loved one, but their hands are tied because of the system.
Right.
And we have to change that.
We do. We do. Wow, what a great cause. And thanks for coming today, you guys. Hey, you guys, pick up her book. It's called Noah's Schizophrenia, A Mother's Search for the Truth. It's Kartar Diamond. Okay, you guys, here's her book. And I hope you guys will pick it up. Is there a way that people can contact you?
Yes, I created a website just for the book. It's called noahschizophrenia.com. So that's Noah, Noahs, schizophrenia.com. And through that website, there's also links to Facebook and Twitter accounts. I'm blogging on a regular basis, articles and information. So it's slowly developing where, you know, people could use it as a resource for more information and guidance and advocacy. And I don't
Nice.
just post my own articles, I post other interesting blogs and articles from
And
other social
perspectives.
media.
Nice.
Mhm.
All right, cool. Well, we sure appreciate you coming on today. And we got to get out of here for today. But you guys, join us again next week. This is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity. And we will see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Connect the dots and keep the motion. Can achieve your goal. Let's hit the high road.
Hey, you guys, join me next week on The High Road for more stories filled with wisdom, love, and hope for our future. Have a fabulous week and know that by staying on the high road, you will make it to your destination. Visit my website, nancyyearout.com, where you can book a private session to learn how to tap into your own abilities. And check out my YouTube channel. It's Nancy Yearout's High Road to Humanity.
You can achieve your goal.